Good morning. The August 6th Michigan primary election is just a few weeks away. So today on Spotlight, we begin our interviews with the major political party candidates who want to fill the seat of Michigan's retiring U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow. Why are they campaigning to serve in that governmental body, and what policies would they be for or against if elected? We begin with the two Democrats on the primary ballot, U.S. Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and actor businessman Hill Harper. It's Sunday, July the 21st. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. If I ran into you on the street and I said, you got 30 seconds to tell me why you want to go from the House of Representatives to the U.S. Senate, what would you say?
I would say for me, going from the House to the Senate is about being able to deliver even more for my constituents on the issue that is my sun and my moon, which is America and Michigan has to be a place where we can get in and stay in the middle class. My whole life revolves around that. We work on that, jobs with dignity, and bringing down the costs of healthcare, prescription drug, housing. That's where I live. That's what I do in the House, and that's what I want to do in the Senate, because I think it's an existential issue for our time.
You come from a family that had a successful business background, so you know something about business and the economy. Are you comfortable with where the economy is right now? Do you feel we're on track? And if not, what should be done?
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone feels good about the inflation. And while, it seems like it's coming down, people are struggling to cover their basic needs, be able to save and provide for their kids. So it's a very real thing. I think, no one person can fire a silver bullet and solve inflation. We would have fired it if you could do that. What I believe we have done, particularly those of us in sitting House and Senate, is created an industrial policy that has created a renaissance of manufacturing here in Michigan. We got 44 new factories being built. We made that decision. We wanted to bring our supply chains home after COVID, after we all got religion on supply chains during COVID. And for me, that is one of the most important things that will help not just our economy today, but into the future for generations. So it's not a perfect solution. No one has a perfect solution, or else we would have solved it.
Certainly a lot of publicity since the 2022 U.S. Supreme Court Dobbs versus Jackson decision. Do you support a national abortion ban?
No, of course not. It's the opposite. We're 2 years after the overturning of Roe. There's one party that has fought for overturning Roe for 50 years, that passed legislation that made it harder to get not only an abortion, but contraception, IVF, all of these things. They haven't stopped for 50 years, even after overturning Roe. And you have another group who's trying to defend those rights and say that our granddaughters should have the same rights as their grandmothers. So of course I don't support an abortion ban, a nationwide abortion ban. They are coming for in vitro fertilization. They're coming for contraception, for a woman's right to travel across state lines. And we just can't have a failure of imagination that it's not going to get worse depending on who we send to Washington.
Should it be a state's decision, or should it be a national decision?
It should be a national decision, as Roe was when we passed it 50 plus years ago. It was a case law that passed through the Supreme Court so that the women of Indiana, who are, by the way, crowding our West Michigan abortion clinics, don't have to cross and sneak across state lines in order to get health care if they've got a dangerous pregnancy, if they've been the victim of rape or incest. Those are things that I believe most people understand to be core to a woman's right to her own body, controlling her own body, a family's right to their own decision making. And I think it shouldn't be that it just is a patchwork of states, because I'm not going to leave other women behind outside of the state of Michigan.
Congresswoman, do you feel as though America is backsliding on civil rights, or we're right where we should be?
Oh, we're definitely not where we should be. The proof is in the pudding, where right now we cannot get a vote on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is a version of the Civil Rights Voting Act that was passed in the 60s. It's really crazy. And for me, there is no way to say that we're done. There's no way to say that we should be good to go, because we can't even vote on issues of consequence. It's another reason I want to be in the Senate, right? Have an up or down vote on voting rights. You want to vote against voting rights? Show the whole world that you want to do that. I want to vote on it, and I want to vote yes, just like I did in the House.
All polls show that Americans are concerned to differing degrees about immigration and protecting our borders. What is the solution to immigration in this country? Because we are a country that was built on immigration.
Right, right. We're a nation of immigrants that can't get immigration right. And no one's proud of the southern border, right? You look at the southern border, especially for Michigan as a northern border state, we know what a healthy border looks like, and no one's proud of what's going on in the southern border. The issue is we need reasonable people from both sides of the aisle to sit in a room together, put the media out, kick out Twitter and all that other stuff, and actually hammer out a solution that does a couple of things. Number one, makes it easier for people to get vetted before they even leave home, right? Our farmers in West Michigan need labor. They can't get enough labor. No one wants people crossing over the border, walking 1,000 miles, coming over and claiming asylum when what they need is an economic visa. Let them get vetted properly at home and plugged into jobs in West Michigan or up in Mackinac where we need them.
We'll hurry right back with more questions right after this. Congresswoman, anyone who has seen your campaign commercial know that health care is one of the reasons that you're in this race.
Yeah.
Aside from what we've already talked about on women's rights dealing with health care, is there something else major that you would like to see done in the next administration for Americans as it relates to health care?
I mean, look, the experience of my mom getting diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer here at Henry Ford when she didn't have health insurance was one of the fundamental moments of my life. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, right? And I think that as a country, we are paying too much for our health care and our prescription drugs. It is just like a white-gloved racket. That's what I call it. And for me, I think having people come up to me in the grocery store, pull me aside and say, you know, I can afford to send my child to summer camp, but I can't afford the 4 inhalers that they require to have on site. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, or insulin, or all these things. So I've tried to work on actual legislation, bipartisan legislation, to attack that cost because it comes from a personal place. And for me, one of the proudest moments was when I passed a bipartisan piece of legislation on prescription drug transparency. We can comparison shop for everything in America, but you couldn't do it on drugs. That makes no sense. So we required the drug companies to put up publicly all the different types of drugs that you can get, generic or name brand, and where you can get it the cheapest. And it was President Trump that signed that into law. So that's what I mean when I say to people, like, you need someone who works head down in a bipartisan way. I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. People are paying too much for their drugs, and that comes from personal experience with my own family.
We have some hot spots all around the world right now. Should the United States put even more military might and muscle to Israel?
Give them more assistance? Mm-hmm. Well, look, I can't think of an issue that is more roiling the state of Michigan than what's going on in Israel and Gaza. I mean, it's personal here. We have the largest, Arab and Muslim American community in the country, a big Jewish community, tons of young people, lots of people engaged on this issue. And
Arab Americans feel as though our current policy is lopsided.
Right. So I think for me, my feeling is when a country is attacked, like Israel was on October 7th, like we were, every country has the right to go after the perpetrators of those attacks, the organizers, the funders, those types of folks. But I'm also very influenced by serving 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military in places like Anbar Province and Ramadi, where I saw the United States make mistakes in our own military campaigns. For me, it colors how I look about the operations going on in the Middle East right now. Sometimes the way you prosecute a war can make you less safe over time, not more safe. To me, I think that the negotiations, we're trying to get to a negotiated ceasefire, which is the answer for everybody. In the meantime, I've watched, no one likes when countries are using the media to go at each other, which is what's happened now. I don't think that's a good thing. But I do think that the way that Israel has sometimes prosecuted this war has maybe not learned the mistakes that we learned the hard way in the United States, in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Should we give more military aid to Ukraine?
So I believe that Putin won't be stopped unless he hits steel, unless he understands that the community, the global community, is not going to allow him to roll over a democracy. And so for me, I've been supportive of arming the Ukrainians, of making sure they can push back on Putin. And if you think that that we just gave them the keys to Ukraine, they wouldn't come for Poland or the Baltic states, then you're just kidding yourself. So I believe that we support the Ukrainians, we give them the ability to punch Putin in the mouth, then they can eventually get to the negotiating table. We have 2 new NATO members after years of not having new NATO members, big NATO members. I think that tells you all you need to know about Putin's mistake in Ukraine. You know, he claimed he was worried about Ukraine becoming a part of NATO. Well, you got 2 new members because of this egregious military campaign that you've launched. I think that everyone in NATO has to pay their dues. That is important, and we've got a lot more countries paying their dues now than 4 years ago before Putin rolled over Ukraine.
Do you feel as though democracy is a major issue in this campaign?
I mean, we had a failed assassination attempt on a former U.S. president. That's a huge moment of inflection for any country. So I don't think that we can say everything's great and people are making too big a deal about our democratic system. No. I mean, we're an experiment, and I want that experiment to work. And we're going through a period of political instability. We got to get through that. This is not the end. We got to get through it, and we're going to get through it together. But I don't think that anyone should be dismissing the threats to our democracy. I think they're very real.
Those who were found guilty of attacks on January 6th, should they be pardoned?
No. I'm sorry. As someone who barricaded herself in her office on January 6th, as someone who hauled away from the floor of the House, if you come in and you are threatening violence, that whether you're in person, whether you're at a political event, you're in the U.S. Capitol, you're threatening violence on someone's home, you're intimidating them and sending them violent messages, you should be held accountable. That's part of the problem right now, is it's become normalized to threaten violence, and that is not okay.
The best way to keep America and our communities and our schools safe is?
The best thing to do to keep us safe, our communities, everybody, is to invest in education. I think when young people have opportunities, when they see themselves with a hopeful future, when they have that dream that they can get into the middle class, they can have that safe and secure life, then they don't resort to violence. They don't become, God forbid, a shooter in our schools. They have hope. And for me, that is something that our youngest generation needs more than anything. They have the diseases of despair right now, mental health issues, opioid addiction. So the best way to preserve their safety is to give them opportunities.
All right. Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin, thank you so much for coming in, sharing your priorities with us today, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And coming up, candidate Hill Harper, right after this. Hill Harper, thanks for coming in. All right, you have never been elected by the people to a political office before. Why do you want to start at the U.S. Senate?
Well, you know, in this moment, it's needed. You know, so many people are hurting, Chuck, and they don't feel represented. And so not being a career politician in this moment is a really good thing. You know, I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. I'm not taking any money from APAC. I'm not taking any money from the traditional folks that would have their hooks in politicians, so to speak. And that's what people want. People want to be represented. I mean, there's some great senators.
People tired of career politicians?
People are tired of career politicians. Well, think about the U.S. Senate, though. We're talking about the U.S. Senate as a 100-person body, the most powerful deliberative body in all of politics. We have enough career politicians in there. We have enough people who have come up through the ranks. We need more diversity of lived experience, more diversity of information. Take, for example, if I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I'll be the only active union member in the United States Senate. Unions deserve representation in the Senate. I'd be only one of 2 parents of an elementary school-age child in the U.S. Senate. Children and parents who are sending their kids to school need representation in the U.S. Senate. I'd be only one of a handful of small business owners in the U.S. Senate. Small business owners need representation. So it's really about the makeup that's there. We have too many career government employees in the U.S. Senate, and we need more folks with a different lived experience, a different perspective.
What's your assessment of the economy, and is there something in particular you would like to champion to get the economy to where you believe it should be?
Absolutely. We have to invest here in Michigan. You know, I keep hearing from so many folks, I meet with a number of UAW folks, a number of folks who are in so-called manufacturing. They're frustrated because many of their plants are actually assembly plants. We're not doing the ground up manufacturing. We're bringing in parts that were manufactured somewhere else around the world, China most likely, and we're assembling them. They want infrastructure investment in manufacturing and ground up jobs. Why are we investing in Chinese-backed companies rather than investing in our own homegrown manufacturing and infrastructure right here in Michigan? We have some great companies here.
Is America losing ground on civil rights, or are we right where we should be?
Oh, we're definitely losing ground. You know, we look at the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been gutted. That's why if I'm in the U.S. Senate, I'm going to champion the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act, and really just re-upping the Voting Rights Act of 1965. When we think about all the different advancements that have been made during the civil rights movement, many of them have been pulled back and pulled away. We have to undergird and just create a sense of opportunity and a baseline support for communities that have been historically underrepresented and marginalized. And we see the positive results. The two most populous states in the country and also have the largest GDP happen to be the states that have the most diversity. Diversity, inclusion, and unity works for everybody, and that's what we have to champion here.
Do we need a national abortion ban?
Absolutely not. I mean, the fact that we're weaponizing, I'll give you an example. My mother's 86 years old. She lives with me and my son here in Detroit. So I have an 8-year-old and an 86-year-old in my house. Okay. It is outrageous that my mother at 86 years old would have more body autonomy and control over her healthcare decisions than a 24-year-old staffer on my campaign. The idea of weaponizing choice, the idea that government should be involved in a healthcare decision made between a woman and her licensed healthcare provider is wrong. And we need to federally legislate that. We need to federally legislate women's reproductive rights, women's reproductive freedom, and body autonomy medical decisions for all people.
But what do you say to people who say it should be a states' rights issue, that states have the ability to be able to make their own decisions for what's best for the residents of their state?
No, that's absolutely not true. What it is you have to protect freedoms. You have to protect body autonomy. There are certain inalienable rights and freedoms that can't be taken away. You can't say everything's states' rights, because what starts to happen is a minority thought process, if they have power, can start taking away individual civil liberties and rights. And that's why we have to codify certain things federally. Everybody, for instance, I want to get universal health care done. If you get sick, you deserve to see a doctor. That shouldn't be up to states. It's the number one cause of personal bankruptcies. These are things that have to get done federally, just like women's reproductive freedom.
All right, we need to take a quick little pause for the calls. We'll hurry right back with Hill Harper right after this. Hill Harper, immigration is a huge issue right now.
Yeah.
If elected to the Senate, what would you do in terms of championing that issue to make sure that it is not the problem that everybody seems to feel it is now? Well,
first and foremost, we have to secure our border. The fact that we have fentanyl coming across that is killing people, literally killing. This is a matter of life and death. And there are other folks coming across that mean to do us harm, and that's real. And we have to secure our border. We have to know who's coming across our border. But at the same time, we're a country built off of immigrants, right? And so we have to have a pathway to legal immigration. We have to stop illegal immigration and have a very clear, efficient pathway to legal. And that requires investment. It requires investment in more Border Patrol, requires investment in more border judges, more counselors and asylum-seeking representatives, folks who can actually work through these files to know who's coming across and who we allow through legally.
Does America's current foreign policy under the Biden administration as relates to the Middle East, is it a good policy or does it need fixing?
It needs fixing. I mean, I'm one of the first U.S. Senate candidates in the country to call for ceasefire. And, I say all the time, there's no good war and there's no bad peace. And we cannot allow special interest groups like AIPAC to control our representatives. 74% of Michiganders are in favor of ceasefire, yet less than 10% of our representatives have called for it. There's a massive disconnect there, and that's not right. It's not correct. That just means that the purse strings of an organization, special interest group such as AIPAC, is actually controlling the decision-making of representatives. Representatives need to represent people, not special interest check writers.
When Arab Americans, which we have a large sector here, say that our foreign policy is lopsided, upside down, you agree with this?
Yes, I do. I agree. I agree. Again, it goes back to Citizens United, 2010, and that allows a system for unlimited and unfettered dark money to control our politics. The fact is that you have massive special interest groups like the NRA and the gun lobby, like Big Pharma, like Big Oil, like Department of Defense contractors, like AIPAC and others that are controlling the outcomes of elections by and large through the checks they write, and therefore they're controlling the representatives. I always say, I'm here to represent people. I'm here to represent Michiganders, not big check writers, not special interests. The first three words of the Michigan Constitution, first three words of the U.S. Constitution are we the people, not we the super PAC, not we the politician, not we the special interest group. We have to represent people.
Do you support more U.S. military aid to Ukraine?
I do in this moment, and the reason why, and I'm not, we have to support Ukraine. It's not about more, it's about support. Why? We have to think efficiently. Putin has already made it very clear he's not going to stop in Ukraine, he's going to continue through Poland, etc. We want to stop Putin now. We have to stop. It's the most efficient spend now, right? If we stop him now, it doesn't open us up to spending billions and billions of more later and potentially putting American lives at risk. That has to be our first thought. Never risking American life as long as we can stop Putin now.
How do we make our communities and our schools safer?
I mean, that's one of my biggest issues. Safe communities, community violence intervention programs, and getting holistic change. I mean, there's a number of factors from the economic development or lack thereof to the lack of investment in community centers to the lack of investment and underinvestment in schools, lack of investment in entrepreneurs creating businesses and jobs in these communities. We have to deal with the root causes of the problem, but also deal with the problems immediately with supporting community violence intervention programs. Much of the federal funding, the ARPA dollars that have been working well in supporting CVI programs here in Detroit Metro are gone. And so as a U.S. Senator, I will fight to get those dollars back, fight to have CVI programs that are already proven and already working, really good organizations here in Detroit and in Michigan that are doing this work.
Quick final question, 10 seconds left. Is democracy under threat in the United States?
Democracy is absolutely on the ballot, without question. And I'm going to fight to end Citizens United, which I think is the biggest threat to our democracy. And who you elect to represent you matters. Elect people who want to represent people. That's the key.
Hill Harper, thanks so much for coming in. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Chuck.
Next week, begin meeting Michigan's Republicans who would like to serve in the U.S. Senate. I'm Chuck Stokes. Have a good week.